Hi guys, welcome back. So today what we're going to be looking at is we're actually going to be looking at an application of energy transfers in chemical reactions. And specifically we're going to be looking at some life reactions, so photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So I think that this is a really interesting topic. I think that your textbook only goes through it pretty briefly, and that's because as a chemist, we're primarily focused on the chemical equation and we're focused on the change in enthalpy or the change in energy within the reaction. So we want to know if things are exothermic or endothermic. That's very much the perspective of a chemist. So keep that in mind as we go through. I think that photosynthesis and cellular respiration, though, can be really, really interesting from the biological perspective. And I really think that you should go out and you should have a look at what's going on the cellular level as well, because I find this stuff, it's really interesting. Okay, so like I said, primarily we're looking at chemical energy in the body, okay, and we're talking about, how it relates in a chemical sense. So let's talk about photosynthesis to start off with. So photosynthesis, the word photosynthesis comes from two words, photo, which means light, and synthesis. So it's synthesizing or it's creating energy from light. So the reason that plants do this is because they can't actually get energy from their environment. They don't have a stomach, they don't have teeth, they can't go chase things, they don't produce chemicals that dissolve outside of the body like fungi do. They produce chemicals that dissolve the wood that they are living on, and that rots, and then they absorb that through their roots. Plants can't do that. They don't produce those kinds of chemicals. So what they do is they use light from the sun. And they take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as well as water. Plants need a lot of water. And then they turn that into sugars and oxygen. And then we breathe that oxygen. So trees are really important. I think that, if you can, plant a plant because, that's going to help you to survive and produce oxygen and take all the nasty carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So there's a special name for organisms that make their own food, and this special name is called an autotroph. So auto meaning self, so like an autobiography, and troph, like a trophic level, so self-feeding. There's two kinds of autotrophs. There's the chemoautotrophs, which do it chemically. Those are the really cool, weird bacteria and stuff that you see at the bottom of the seafloor near sea vents and things like that. And then there's the photoautotrophs, which are things like plants because they photosynthesize. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I think I'm getting too much into the biology of it. Okay, so let's talk about the reaction. So they're using carbon dioxide gas, and water that they're pulling up from their roots. Oh, sorry, that's not a gas. That'll be a liquid water. And that is going to produce sugar. So glucose specifically, C6H12O6. By the way, all sugars have this nice little ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 for their carbon to hydrogen to oxygen. It's one of the key features of sugar molecules. And then also produces oxygen. So let's go ahead and balance this equation. So looking at this side of the equation, I can see I've got 6 of the carbons in the glucose. So I'm going to multiply this value at the front here by 6. Next, I'm going to have a look at the hydrogen. So there's 12 hydrogens on this side. I've got 2 on this side, so I'm going to multiply this one by 6 as well. All right, so I always do the oxygen last, and that's because elemental oxygen, it's probably the easiest one to do. But if you do it first, you're going to have to go back at the end and change it again anyway, so you might as well leave it to the end. Okay, so we've got 12 oxygens here, we've got 6 oxygens here, so in total we have 18 oxygens. Now 6 oxygens are accounted for in the glucose molecule, which means we need 12 more oxygen to make up this reaction. So to balance that, that's going to be 6 oxygen gas molecules. And I should put this could be a solid or it could be dissolved in solution. Again, sometimes kind of hard to tell with these reactions. And then oxygen gas is produced and released through the leaves. Okay, so this is the nice balanced equation just here. So we can see we've got 6 carbon dioxide gas molecules plus 6 water molecules turn into 1 glucose molecule. There you go, aqueous. It is dissolved in water, so it can travel through the phloem and then we've got 6 oxygen molecules which are released through the leaves. And this gives us a change in enthalpy of positive 2,802.7 kilojoules per mole. So previously, when we've worked out these calculations, we've done them with joules. This is 1,000 times greater than that. So there is a huge amount of energy that can be stored from this reaction. And I know that this is being stored because this is an endothermic reaction, and I know that because this value here is positive. If that value is negative, it would be exothermic and releasing energy to the environment. So these are just some of the some images here, and a couple of these are in your textbook, and a couple of these I've just grabbed from online because, again, this is a topic I find really interesting. So this is probably above and beyond what you actually need to know. But if you're like me and you like being a nerd and you like learning, then stick along. So this screen diagram here, this is called a chloroplast, and every single plant has chloroplasts. Any single photosynthetic organism has these because these are capable of turning light from the sun into glucose. And it's really interesting, and the more complicated or the more thalcoloid discs, which are these like these little discs here that we see, the more of those, the more sensitive plants are to light. Oh, sorry, no, that's the wrong way around. Yes, no, that's right. They are sensitive to light. So generally, if they've got a lot of these thalcoloid cells inside the chloroplast, it's plants that exist in darker environments. And that can actually change the color of the plant. Similarly, if you have a plant and that plant is something that grows in very lit conditions, then generally they would have less of these thalcoloid discs within the chloroplast. And so that's just one of the adaptive strategies of plants to cope with sunlight. Because you don't want too much sunlight. They can only store so much of this energy. And in particular, we've talked about this before with limiting reagents. If I don't have enough water, so say it's during a drought, then we can't actually go and produce those carbon dioxide, those sugar molecules and oxygen molecules if we don't have the reactant of water. Okay. So it's very important that we have a balance of each of these chemicals and a balance of the amount of sunlight that a plant receives. Because it doesn't matter how much sunlight it receives if there's no water to produce those reactions. All right, so this one here, this third diagram here, now this is totally off topic, but this is like for me, I like seeing what's going on the chemical level because I feel like I don't understand procedure. I'm like, what do you mean it just, like the light just goes into the cell and then it just produces sugar? What do you mean? Like what's actually happening? I always want to understand the mechanism behind it. So this diagram shows the mechanism behind what's going on. So with photosynthesis, and again, this is above and beyond, so if this is getting too crazy, you can jump ahead. But there's 2 phases of photosynthesis. One of the phases of photosynthesis actually happens in the dark, and one of the phases of photosynthesis actually happens in the light. Okay, so that's why we've got PS2 and PS1, because one of these reactions happens in the dark and then the other reaction happens in the light. Okay, and so all these chemicals here, this chemical here, ADP, so this is kind of like energy, ADP and ATP, right? So think of it like a battery. So ATP is a fully charged battery, and this is called adenine triphosphate. So it's got 3 phosphates within its chemical compound. And what it does is that when it reacts or when it's trying to pass on energy, it passes on one of those phosphates and we end up with ADP. So this is adenosine diphosphate. So this would have 2 phosphorus structures within its molecular compound. And so this is now like our spent battery. And all they've done is they pass that phosphate with energy onto another part of the cell. So plants actually do respire as well, because what they do is during the nighttime when they don't have access to sunlight, they have to get the energy from somewhere, so they're able to get it from the sugars that they have stored in their cells. All right. Now, cellular respiration. Speaking about cellular respiration, so it's the exact same reaction as photosynthesis, it's just happening in reverse. And so the change in enthalpy is actually the exact same value, it's just in the negatives now. And again, it's a huge amount of energy that is being produced. And one of my chemistry professors at university, he would always sort of talk about how we are burning slowly. Because this energy is just like insane, the amount of energy that's being released by the process of digesting food. But we do it over such a long time frame and such a released time frame that we really don't notice how much energy that we are getting. And the reason for that, and again, this is getting super technical, is you have this like series of enzymes, right? And what happens is it's like a little electron is being passed like a little tennis ball from each of these compounds from one to the next. And at each phase of this process, what's actually happening is you're producing little ATP molecules at each phase. Now, if we were to have this happen all in one sort of go, we would lose a lot of that ability to create ATP, because basically if we were to have all this energy burn in one go, it's like I said, it would be a big fire that would be burning. So we just do it very, very slowly through these like passing of electrons down through these enzymes. So again, that was above and beyond, but I just find it, excuse me, really interesting. Okay, so back to our actual lesson now. So humans, I've just said that plants are autotrophic, so they're self-feeders. Humans and other animals are heterotrophic because we have to consume food for energy. And that's stored inside the plants, inside the sugars. And so what's happening when we eat that sugar and we're breathing in oxygen, then we breathe out carbon dioxide, and there's actually water that we breathe out with the carbon dioxide. If you've ever pressed your face up to the glass and you've ever breathed onto the glass, you would be able to see the little water droplets or the little fog that's produced on the window. So we do actually have water that's being released in our breath as well. So that's cellular respiration in a nutshell. And moving on to the sort of more biological aspect of it, this is happening in the powerhouse of the cell, and this is called the mitochondria. And interesting fact about the mitochondria is that we as humans, or we as an evolutionary species, however many thousands or millions or billions of years ago when we first developed, this was actually a symbiotic relationship with a bacteria. And so mitochondria are not actually a human cell. They're actually a bacterial cell that we've had in our systems for so long now that they've just sort of adapted and become part of the cell. And the reason that we know this is because the DNA in mitochondria varies to human DNA. So we don't actually have codes that, like proteins or DNA that codes for the mitochondria. What actually happens is that the mother passes some mitochondria to the fetus during pregnancy. So your mum's mitochondria is in you right now. Sorry, Dad, you don't really get a say in this. So it's a very matriarchal line. So I just find that very interesting. Okay, so let's get back into some of these questions. I have been harping on a little bit. I'm sorry. I do find this really interesting. So explain the difference between an autotroph. So I'm going to give you a second to pause the video and I'll tell you what the answer is after the jump. So autotrophs, self-feeders, heterotrophs, we have to consume food for energy. Okay, question 2. Explain the difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Again, I'll give you a second to pause the video and then I'll jump back in straight away with the answer. So photosynthesis, it's a process by which we take light and we turn it into energy by storing it in glucose molecules. And we do that by combining 6 carbon dioxide molecules with 6 water molecules to form 1 glucose molecule and 6 oxygen gas molecules. Cellular respiration is the exact same process but in reverse, and during cellular respiration energy is released, so it's an exothermic reaction. We also kind of know that because we feel warm. So if you were to touch your skin right now, you're losing heat to the environment, so you're an exothermic reaction. All right, question 3, identify the organelles in which photosynthesis and cellular respiration occur and explain why humans cannot be autotrophs. Again, have a quick think to yourself, pause the video, and I'll come back straight away with the answer. Okay, so question 3, organelles for photosynthesis is the chloroplasts, and then for cellular respiration, it's the mitochondria. Humans can't be autotrophs because we don't have chloroplasts. We only have the mitochondria, and that's come from the matriarchal line. Okay, question 4. Critique the change in enthalpy value of cellular respiration by calculating bond enthalpies for its reactants and its products. Okay, so this is getting more sciencey. I might pause this one for a minute and I'm going to jump into number 5 and number 6 because those are very simple questions to answer. So again, pause here, have a go, and I'll come back after the jump. Okay, question 5. How could a chloroplast increase the rate of production of glucose? Well, we could increase the number of thalcaloid cells in thalcaloid discs within the chloroplast cell. Discuss the role of mitochondria within cells. Mitochondria, they're the powerhouse. Okay, so I'll leave those last two questions. Let's jump into this question 4 now. So critique the change in enthalpy value of cellular respiration by calculating bond enthalpies for its reactants and its products. So let's go. I'm going to go grab that enthalpy table. All right, so this is the enthalpy table, and I think this was from chapter 9.2. So it just tells us the energy within the bonds. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to calculate the bond enthalpies for 1 mole of each of the products and the reactants involved in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. I've gone ahead and I've calculated the bond enthalpies for the simple compounds, carbon dioxide, water, and oxygen. But what I wanted to just quickly show you is I wanted to show you how we find the bond enthalpy for glucose. And so to do that, we have to know what the structure of glucose actually is. So I've just gone and Googled some simple structures for you. So if I just scroll down here, so you can see there's a bunch of different representations that we can use. And just keep in mind with these hydrocarbons, so each of these little corners actually represents a carbon. We just won't write it generally. So what I'm going to do, I might actually pick this particular structure to help me with determining what the bond enthalpy is going to be, because I think that this structure is probably going to be the most informative for the numbers and the types of bonds that are within the glucose molecule. Okay, so straight up, I can see that we've got a C double bonded to an oxygen. So that would be similar to, yep, this one here. Oh wait, no, hold on, that's the triple bond, this one here. So this is going to have a total energy of 804 kilojoules per mole. All right, let's keep looking. So we've done that bond there. Next, we might have a look at the carbon to carbon bonds, because there's quite a few carbon to carbon single bonds. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbon to carbon bonds. So that means we've got 5 lots of a single bonded carbon to carbon. So if I scroll back up here, that's going to be this value here. So I've got 5 lots of 346 kilojoules per mole. Okay, let's keep going. So this bond here is actually, I should write this like this. So this is going to look CHOH. So this has actually got a carbon single bonded to an oxygen at the end here. So let's write this as CO. So there's that 1 bond there, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 carbon single bonded to oxygen. So again, if we just scroll back up to the table and we have a look at the carbon to oxygen bond, that's going to be 5 lots of 358. Okay, then we do the same thing, looking now at the carbon to hydrogen bonds. So we've got 1 carbon hydrogen bond, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've actually got 6, 7 of those bonds. So if we look at the carbon to hydrogen bonds, we've got 7 lots of 414 kilojoules. So that's just this information here. So we just go through and we just repeat that process until we've encountered all of the bonds, and then I'm going to add up all of those values. Okay, so the last bond that I should mention as well, so I did all of these bonds, and then I just forgot to mention the oxygen to hydrogen bond, so that would be these bonds that would be in here. So I've just added those onto my calculation, and I've got 9,537 kilojoules for 1 mole of glucose. And we only have 1 mole of glucose in our reaction, so I'm just going to leave it as that. Now, what I did was I added all of the energy for the products and for the reactants. So for this, I've got 15,204 kilojoules, and then for the products, I've got 12,525 kilojoules. So if we wanted to find that change in enthalpy, we would do the reactants minus the products. So that's going to be 15,204 take away 12,525, and that's going to give me a value of positive 2,679 kilojoules. So that's the total amount of energy gained. Now, if we compare that back to the original change in enthalpy value, so I'm just going to scroll up. Scroll. So this is positive 2,802.2 kilojoules per mole. So let's write that down and let's compare that. So they had 2,800 and, was it 7.2 or 2.7? 2.7. 2,802.7 kilojoules. Now, as you can probably see, these are a little bit different. So that means one of two things. The first would be that I've stuffed up somewhere, which is, you know, probably pretty likely, to be honest. And the second would be is that maybe there's some other process that we're not seeing that's going on, such as the reactions with ATP that actually help to release more energy. So, you know, considering that's not too bad. So if you can, go through, find where I've made a mistake. I'll put the question up just here. So that's all my working. And if you can find a mistake, I will give you one super duper when we return to school. Okay? But you've got to prove it to me. I want to see the maths. I want to see the process. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I think we've answered that question now. So critique the change in enthalpy value of cellular respiration by calculating bond enthalpies. Yep, so we just did our little critique. So that's that question answered. Okie doke, a little bit of a long video. I'm sorry, it is a topic I do enjoy. I do waffle on about it a bit. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.